IVM.
Welcome to Think Fast. It's a podcast where we talk about everything from business to startups to tech to creator economy. And then I suddenly start to make voices like these because I'm just trying to practice my voice modulation because I have a really random new stand for my mic. That's what's been up with me this week. What's been up with you, Suchita?
Fortunately, things more interesting than your new mic stand, Varun.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think going back to the old setup.
I just want to say, ladies and gents, I was right. House of Brands is a feature, not a product. Here.
Fine.
And we're seeing competition heat up, man. Sugar Cosmetics, which I've been rooting for, as that standalone warrior and not distracted by becoming a house of brands, has actually scooped up Ends, which is this skincare focused brand. Very cool products. I've shopped a bunch from them in the past. Paper Boat also apparently is in the market to raise money for its house of brand approach. And the OG roll-up, which is Thrasio, is taking India seriously now. Their CEO has announced a $500 million initial investment in India. So the heat is on. We also have multiple new unicorns, including this one really interesting company called Lead Education. Power Gummies, which we'll talk about a little later on in the episode, has raked up 6 million. Keeping an eye on VD, you and your predictions.
I said it.
Congratulations to the both of us.
Yeah.
Also, in like totally unrelated rubbish, Kanye West and his new bae were caught hanging out with Madonna and Floyd Mayweather, a combination that I didn't see happening. Do you know Kim K is heating things up with Pete Davidson? Kylie Jenner
Somebody said he might be hosting the Oscars, is what they're saying. That is what I read. He might end up hosting the Oscars.
Oh,
yes.
God. Oscars have fallen from grace. Kylie Jenner has hit 300 million followers on Instagram, making her the third largest global account. And there's a couple of super cool new creator plus celebrity-led brand collabs. I don't know if you saw, but Kanye West, Balenciaga and Gap are coming together for this, cool new capsule collection. Kanye, speaking of Kanye, his trilogy apparently is all set to launch on Netflix. Did you see the trailer?
Yeah, I saw the trailer. It's so cool. And the fact that they shot this footage for so long, it's crazy. Like, I love these docus where the footage has been going on for years and you finally get them. Like Last Dance was one, where obviously there was a different problem there. But this, I think, it's fascinating. I really look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Style Heroine, which is a super popular Instagram account, they've joined Sergio Rossi, which is a very posh, bougie and popular shoe brand. It's like Jimmy Choo plus. She joined them as an artistic director, again, showing the juxtaposition in between all things creator and brands and how those universes are colliding. Closer to home, Karan Johar has joined Rogner.
Wrong. It's pronounced wrong. It's just spelled wrong.
Rogner has joined Wrong as their chief creative advisor. I also want to say
I have a question. Is this a wrong decision or a right decision? Only time will tell.
Guys, I just want to remind you, Varun's turning 40 in 7 months. Which explains these jokes. Also, I just want to say thank you for introducing me to Shark Tank India.
Isn't it fun? Isn't it a lot of fun?
Bro, it is so much fun. I lost it yesterday. I was seeing that Montessori episode. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
I haven't laughed this hard in my life. Also, I don't know why people were shitting on Ashneer. He's actually pretty, I think apart from one episode where he got a little irritated with the contestants, he's actually very, funny.
Can I be honest? The Twitter crowd shits on him a lot, and so does LinkedIn. And I feel the problem is that it's just the language, right? They're speaking in Hindi. They're speaking how you would normally speak if you spoke in Hindi. I think that's the problem. And that's what I've always felt. I thought what they're doing and saying. My favorite episode though, my favorite piece was a couple episodes back. There was a Hammer headphones piece which had Aman there. That was where it got a little weird. I don't know if you saw that episode.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
So Hammer has a headphone, but has headphones, has electronic toothbrushes and a bunch of other stuff there. And this guy comes in, all the sharks are just looking at Aman, because Aman obviously is bored.
Yeah.
And Aman's just sitting full stoic. He's not reacting to it. He's like, no, I'm going to let everybody else talk before I come into it. And everybody asks the question and say, "Par yahan to bada shark baitha hua hai." And this is one moment which is my favorite one, where I literally pinged him. He's like, boat to Titanic hai, hum to chote boat hai. He's like, oh, Titanic doob gaya tha. So it's I think it's entertaining. It's fun. I just feel bad for Ranvijay selling Flipkart and Upgrade after everything. Apart from that, I think it's fine.
He better have charged a shit ton of money for basically being like a peddler of Flipkart.
You didn't get this like a coupon.
Seriously, dude. No, but generally a very, very entertaining show. And I think I have to say, it's awesome to see all types of entrepreneurs. You see husband, wives, you see mothers and, kids, you see brothers, sisters, you see college friends. And I think just the diversity of who can be an entrepreneur is what's truly, truly, truly spectacular about the show. Though I find it a little cheesy when suddenly, one of the sharks will whatever, swivel in their chair and just be like, CAC, money, customer acquisition cost. Ye wo hota hai. Yeah, but see, simple terms which people need to latch on to. But I just think it's an excellent show. It's the right amount of drama, and honestly, all the sharks come together in a really, really, really fun way.
Someone said something the other day. Actually, there were two things. One was I don't know if you saw this huge protest that happened by the CA community against Piyush Bansal. Is that his full name? The Lenskart founder. Because he tells this one company, the robotics company comes in and they're like, we have a CA who also I think had equity in the company, if I remember right. And he's like, CA se thoda dur rehna. He just said that. Like he just made fun of it. And why do you have equity to your CA is what he said.
Yeah.
Oh my God, ऑनलाइन डिफेमेशन केस फाइल कर दो. लेंसकट से आज के बाद कोई भी सीए कुछ नहीं खरीदेगा. And I was like,
dude, I don't know what has happened to people, but everyone just needs to chill out and take a joke. Actually, I think one last thing I'll add over here, and then we will stop talking about Shark Tank, hopefully, is I think the thing that I love about it is it just makes founders also seem like humans. Each of the sharks, they are f***ing funny. They have their own personality. They have their own style. They have like this very really Muffat way of also talking.
Exactly.
And
They've been trained well.
But I think that's what people need to realize founders are. We are human and, we like having fun. We like joking around and just lighten up, man.
And the fact that memes are getting made on them shows that it's become culture now. So many memes. I mean, like the Malika Dua one, Biswa's been doing a bunch. Rohan's obviously gotten into it. And Rohan's story is great, and that will be my literally last Shark Tank thing. Rohan was making a bunch of these memes on Shark Tank meme videos, and Aman from Boat, I think, commented on it, and then he and Namita, and so Namita and he were live with Rohan on his Pune. So both of them went live with Rohan on his YouTube channel. I think it's super sporting that they're sharing these things on their feeds. They're having fun with it. I think that's the best part. Everyone's having fun with it. Don't take it so seriously. It's television. It's supposed to be like dramatic and fun and random. But in other news, I wrote a book and it's out for pre-order. So that's what's happened with me this week. I have a book which is out. And so guys, pre-order. I'll put it everywhere on social media. Please buy. Please support authors.
I bought it. I love this emotional अत्याचार. Please support authors. एक किताब लिखी है जो निकली भी नहीं है. Please support authors.
मैंने लिखा है. सब कुछ एक साल लिखा है मैंने बैठ के. और भी लिखना है मुझे. I will write a book a year from now on is what I'm saying. I'll be
yes. Done.
Yes, but before we go further, and we have gone long into our introduction here, but lots of stuff coming up today. We're doing a bunch of interesting segments. What are you talking about today?
I'm talking about your favorite category, nutraceuticals and supplements and all things wellness.
Yes, and I'm getting into this whole audio platform space. LinkedIn launched their platform. I've just checked it out a little bit. I got access to it, but it's super interesting to look at how that space is going. And we have a guest today. We have a fabulous guest. Chef is what she's asked us to call her. Shephali Bhatt writes a lot about tech and culture for the Mint.
She's awesome,
fabulous reporting. So getting some deep insights from her on this. But before we do any of that and get to our Think Fast segment, it's time for a break. And my lasting thought to the break is, guys, support authors, watch Shark Tank. Let's go for a break and be right back with Think Fast.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Suchita. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders and change makers from across business, media, marketing and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcasts website, app or wherever you get your podcast from.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we watch Shark Tank and talk about it a lot and have a lot of fun doing it. But this is the Think Fast segment where we actually ask each other random questions and ask each other to be fast in the way we think and speak. That do not make any fluid sense, but I'm going to leave it at that. So what do you have for me today? What's your first?
Are you ready, Varun? Also, we need to be really, really fast this time around. Question for you. Kotak versus Ashneer. Shit's getting serious. This abusive tape apparently is legit because now Kotak has filed a case against Ashneer and Ashneer had a case. Basically, there's just a lot of like cases being filed.
Cases
Lawyers are making a shit ton of money.
Have they got
What
VIP
do
to
you
sponsor
think?
them? Because they throw cases at each other. I'm in a mood today. Mera suitcase VIP hai, tumhara hai American Tourister.
Achha,
No?
is that your think fast response?
Yes, no, not really. See, here's my whole point, right? Is that whenever you decide to be in the public domain, and this is something which I say, I'm not in any way condoning his behavior. If that's actually him, because I heard that audio clip and it shouldn't be.
It was horrible.
It shouldn't do that. Like, I worked in a call center. I know exactly how that feels. So, but I feel the larger point here is as well is that two ends. One is don't say stuff like that. But if you have ever, and most of us have something in our younger days or any days which you would obviously worry about kind of coming out if there is some stuff there, make sure you look into that before you decide to be in the public domain. A lot of this stuff goes sideways later on. So I would say, look at that perspective. But if you said that stuff and he's getting called out, then he deserves it, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't take anything away from anyone filing something against him. And also I think really weird for him to have filed that suitcase or other case at them. But
that was wild. That was stupid. But in any case.
Yeah. In some cases, offense is not the best defense. Is, I guess, the big learning for him over here. I like him on Shark Tank, though. He's entertaining.
Yeah, agree.
Yes. What is my first question to you? Rooter, the Indian homegrown game streaming Twitch competitor, just raised $25 million. I mean, they've had an interesting journey, right? They started off as a sports fan engagement platform, pivoted little before the pandemic around that time to game streaming, really scaled up a lot because they did a bunch of stuff around monetization and fan engagement. There's 25 million. It's massive for a company that's been around for a while now. And what do you think about it?
So I want to say it's not just them, man. Even Turnip, which again is a mobile Twitch, right? A mobile focused Twitch. They also raised about 12.5 million. I think it was announced yesterday, day before or some such thing. This space is heating up, man. And I think, gaming is like a route to metaverse. And I think for there to be any future in all things AR, VR and the likes, the sort of entryway will have to be a gaming. India, obviously, whether you look at PUBG stats or even something as daft as Farmville, right? You've got so many people with too much time on their hands. I'm surprised it's taken this long for platforms like Rooter or Turnip, etc., to really get a recognition or to be able to pick up the kind of money that they have. So net, great to see gaming and gaming ecosystems play out and play up, and this has been a long time coming. Okay, my question for you. Fintech platform Grow just raised money from Satya Nadella, who hasn't just given them money, but has also joined their board first for Satya Nadella vis-a-vis, all Indian startups. What's your take, man?
I think it's super. I mean, I think it's validation, right? Is that when you suddenly have global CEOs, etc., kind of coming on Indian boards, which is something which we've not seen as much of in India. I mean, I'm not sure if I've heard of anybody else having something like this, someone of this prominence on their board. Also shows that I think the industry is coming of age from a global perception standpoint, right? You're suddenly looking at it and saying, this is something which is now legitimately a growing economy on the startup side, on the entire thing. And the fact that you're going to have a lot of these people on boards, which means that at some point, this whole point about the Indian Silicon Valley of sorts is something which we've spoken about for a long time might actually be coming true. And interestingly, fintech is where it started. So that was your question. Mine's actually pretty fresh. Aditya Birla Fashion picked up 51% stake in House of Masaba for 90 crores. That's actually a massive amount of money. It's great for a brand that's actually grown from just being what Masaba was kind of putting out to actually making it a house of peace. And she's done a lot of offshoots of it and kind of built that brand really smartly last many years. What do you think about that?
So, I think, not that I know much about, Masaba's business. I did read a couple of articles and her revenue has been anywhere in between 14 to about 20 crores, from the Business Today article that this was picked up in. So fairly decent, actually not decent, fairly significant multiple. That's a multiple of closer to about 8.5, 10 odd X, which is, a not loose change. So two things that I'll say over here is, without knowing much about Masaba or her business or how House of Masaba is run, is one, I think she's done a fantastic job of building her own brand and really using that to also generally drive awareness for House of Masaba and more, right? Because she's been at this for a while. I think what's also good is, I don't know her specific role at House of Masaba right now. I don't know if she's the CEO or, focused only on
She
the
runs
creative.
the business, yeah.
Oh, she runs a business. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I think what I'll say is, the best creative people who I've met are actually not usually the best people to run a business. And I think her products are great. Her marketing is phenomenal. Her social media is awesome. And if, being a part of the Ditya Birla group gives her the capacity to really double down on the business side of things where, scaling, cost per square foot, all of those sort of, numbers come into play. I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for her. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying Aditya Birla needs to sort of jump into all things millennial and Gen Z and pop culture. But keeping all of that aside, quite a significant multiple, but honestly, great opportunity for someone who's creative, knows that, but may not necessarily be the best versed when it comes to all things business.
She's done a lot of interesting offshoots of her brand as well, right? She's kind of taken that to like everything from cosmetics to everything else. And it'd be interesting to see how they want her to kind of jump into that part. I think that might be the reason why the value was so high is what I was kind of thinking about as well.
Yeah. Question for you and last question for you. Delhi is apparently the startup hub of India. Some journalist on Twitter, sort of dismissed Delhi as being the place that creates a lot of aggressive founders, which I found to be a very problematic statement. But keeping that diss aside, as it turns out, we produce more startups than Bangalore, which is, usually called the Silicon Valley of India. So Delhi being the cool cat and the reason why startups are thriving and ugoing, what's your take on that?
Does that mean that if Delhi is the hub, then Bombay is the spoke? Or I'm continuing my bad joke Monday in this sense, but
ladies and gents, I'm holding my head.
I don't know why we obsess over hubs. Generally, been my point. We ideally should have multiple spots where the more spaces you have from which startups can kind of come across or come out of, it's a better for us. It's all concentrated. Like I think the US is a great example, right? You had too many people concentrated in that one Silicon Valley area that's created so many issues for them in terms of scale. So where people start moving to Texas and all that stuff there. We shouldn't fall into hub culture, if that's the way to call it. But actually, saying there's Delhi, there's Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Chennai seem to be spots. Bombay, understandably, is too expensive. So, which is why I'm guessing people have stayed away from here. But I think it's exciting. It's exciting to see because I remember there was a time when people were talking
also
about how all startups were moving.
Varun, it's
the
hot.
Smell of fish.
Yes.
But it's lovely smell. If you should, it's enjoyable smell. I miss the smell of fish sometimes as I moved away from near the beach.
Can't wait to meet you IRL.
It's got a lovely stink.
Of course it does.
We should make a candle. We should make a candle which is ocean smell from Bombay. But go swiftly moving away from that
candle. Yes.
But swiftly moving away from that, I think it's also great for Delhi though, because there was a time I remember the narrative was that all startups were moving from Delhi to Bangalore, and the fact that this has flipped around is actually a good thing for Delhi. It's always good when things spread out and aren't just concentrated in one area. Going from there, I always need to have an extremely extended question as one of my think fast questions. So KSI and Logan Paul partnered to launch Prime Hydration. And just for context here, these were two creators who had like a bunch of boxing matches, boxing games, and that got prominence because creators boxing is a thing in the States. I'm waiting to see if that happens in India. It'll be fun to see some creators over here have boxing tournaments. Who do you have? I think that's going to be my part B of this question. Who in India as creators should have boxing matches? And what would you pay for to watch that? But it's interesting here when you have two creators who've done a bunch of these, they're launching something called Prime Hydration. It's almost like their competitor to Gatorade, and they've also been able to hit some decent numbers there on launch itself. So yeah, what do you think about this? Creators using their own, like it's like this thing, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. This is like enemies starting a brand together. So what do you think about that?
So I think generally, the space that they've picked is very interesting because if I'm not mistaken, I think Kobe Bryant also had a startup, maybe not in the hydration. I don't know. It's energy drink, right? Prime Hydration.
It's like Gatorade. So it's more
electrolyte
like
of sorts.
Electrolyte, which is flavored.
Yeah. So I think this general sort of space of, electrolytes plus energy drinks plus has generally seen very good exits, I think. And you've seen a couple of other companies like this, Athletic Greens and the likes also get a significant amount of traction in the US. So I think the space that they've picked is fairly interesting. And I mean, we've spoken about this countless times, but creators launching brands, especially those that have a significant amount of following is genuine, and also brands that aren't tied to. So I'm glad they haven't called it KSI and Logan Paul Prime Hydration, right? So I think it's great that they're finding revenue streams outside of just their names or their identities. Logan Paul is very problematic. Apparently, he's gotten into a lot of trouble as a YouTube creator in the past. But that would be my quick 2 cents on this question.
Both the Paul brothers have really made boxing, I think, in the States. So people are literally watching boxing again because creators are boxing. My part B of the question was, who in India would you box?
You box? And me, Varun. There you go.
Yes, let's do that. This will be like... Yes, that's a boxing match. Nobody's paying money to watch. Like, can we have this as a podcast? We can just make sounds.
Excuse me, hamari paas Vishnu hai. Vishnu will pay money to watch that match.
No, for everyone listening who don't know who Vishnu is our audio engineer.
Sound engineer.
He's sound engineer, audio. Sound and audio are the same thing. But anyway, so I don't digress down this slope, and we've been told we've talked too much in this segment anyway.
Awesome. Segue into a break. Is it time for a break?
Yes, it is time for a break. It's time for a break. We'll be right back with Think Fast.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, ladies and gents, we are back and we're kicking off our quote-unquote shallow dive or our shortcut or our short segment. Someone on Twitter think of a fun name and we'll stick to that. We're going to be talking about 2 things today. One's going to be power gummies and actually taking a cue from power gummies, recent raise via 9 unicorns. We're going to be talking about nutraceuticals and supplements, which is a super, super interesting space in India. And the second one, of course, which, Varun's going to take the lead on is all things live audio, specifically with LinkedIn's new initiative in that direction. So I'm going to kick us off with topic number 1, which is nutraceuticals and supplements.
Gummy.
I want to, ignoring that pathetic attempt at stringing together a song, you take a bunch of supplements. Bona Meds was one. What else? What else?
I always get stuck on that. So I use a bunch of stuff. I use a lot of these... what they called, you put tablets into water and they become bubbly drinks.
He did not deny.
Bubbly drinks.
Fasten
I drink a lot of that.
I've told you so many times. Fasten up.
I have the vitamin C ones. I actually use gummies. I have biotin gummies and apple cider vinegar gummies. I also use something else which are like strips you put on your tongue, which gives me vitamin D. So yes, I'm a bit of a junkie for these things. And this is one aspect. Obviously, you have use protein powder, all that other stuff as well. So lots of this random stuff goes into my system.
But ladies and gents, just giving you an overview of the space. So as per an article on Business Standard, gummies is not gummies, but nutraceuticals and supplements. And let's loosely call it that because, just the definition of nutraceuticals is a little like all over the place because everything from protein powders to obviously, your vitamin D supplements to, hair growth, etc. All them sort of come into it. But nutraceuticals and supplements is expected to grow at 35% annually, expected to reach about an $18 billion market size over the next couple of years. We've typically seen large pharma companies like Sun Pharma, which, obviously hit jackpot with Revital, which is one of their top selling products from the Google research that I've done. Yeah. And there's also Himalaya that has, Live 52 and a couple of other ingredient based products. So you've typically seen, nutraceuticals and supplements be a feature, not a product, with respect to...
Can I just say about Live 52 because not about Live 52 because you mentioned it? That's actually prescribed by a lot of doctors. If you had jaundice, that's one of the first things that's prescribed. So they've actually grown a lot because of that. Like doctors actually prescribe it for...
Yeah, and that's a big strategy, not just for them, but even companies like Man Matters and Be Bodywise, which have sort of used these pharma reps as a way to really get into the system. Yeah. So basically, listeners, when you think about all things nutraceuticals and supplements, right, there's 3 large buckets, which was, my analysis of the space. First is your Ayurveda-oriented nutraceuticals and supplements, right? So think of companies like Kapiva, Cureveda, Himalaya, and the likes. These guys usually end up, I'm not using the word peddling in a wrong way, but they end up peddling herbal ingredients like ashwagandha, a really interesting new ingredient called shatavari, which is becoming all the rage, and turmeric, giloy, etc., etc. Yeah. The second is your, in my parlance, scientisty / chemically / like ingredient based, supplements and nutraceuticals. So this is basically people selling stuff like biotin, vitamin C supplements, fish oil, amino acids, apple cider vinegar, melatonin, etc., etc. Oziva is a really interesting player in this space because it's similar to, like, if I had to give you an analogy, think of it as minimalist, right? That beauty company which says this is like 5% peptide or 6% vitamin C to use on your skin. So that's what's happening here. And then the third sort of bucket is companies like Man Matters, Be Body Wise. There's this really interesting women's issues focused nutraceutical brand called Numi that specifically targets issues like PCOS and the likes. And these I would sort of classify as problem solution based. So these guys are actually sum of parts where they'll have a little bit of Ayurveda, they'll have a little bit of ingredient base, but their whole sort of funnel for customer acquisition is essentially, if customer X facing hair loss, you sort of get into their ecosystem. You'll have a doctor or someone consult with you on what your problem is, what the dosage, etc. needs to be. The interesting thing about a couple of these categories is some of them can be sold as OTC. Others at times may require like a light prescription of sorts. So they've really used
Bonomeds.
Bonomeds, yes. So they really use these, docs as like guarantor of trust. And there's another really interesting new company that I found when I was just, spending time researching on this space. It's called Traya Health. They recently raised a 2.2 million pre-series A from Fireside Ventures. And again, they're sort of focused on only hair care as a category. So they, literally only focus on all problem solutions associated with hair care, and nutraceuticals and supplements is one part of it, but shampoos, conditioners, blah, blah, bullshit is like another, sort of part of it. So I think what's really interesting about the nutraceutical and supplement spaces for a couple of companies, they've really been able to build considerable market share. So for example, if you look at revenues of a company like, Man Matters and Be Body Wise, which recently raised a $24 million round with Sequoia participating, I can't remember, but they've raised money from the likes of Matrix, Sequoia, etc. They've hit run rates of 100 crore plus fairly easily and quickly. You've obviously got Capiva, which is under the Baidyanath Pharma Group, if I'm not mistaken. Even they've gotten to 100 crores revenue, mostly through online distribution again, if I'm not mistaken. And circling back to problem solution, I think this is where things get interesting, and I think this is where there's even an opportunity to create some amount of differentiation. There's two types of problem creation that companies are doing, right? So for example, you've got companies like Power Gummies, which is tackling lifestyle problems, right? Lifestyle problems are things like dull skin, dull hair, right? Or like your hair has lost its shine. So, there'll be like hair gloss supplements, things like fatigue, things like I have a problem with this, but anxiety
Sleep
relief.
seems to be a thing right now. Sleep is picking up a lot right now. Sleep meds in that sense. That's something you have to sleep better. Gut has kind of grown a lot.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting, earlier talking about this, one of the reasons that people are buying it is that the way you take them also is an innovation, because you would always look at these as medicines, right? You get tablets, you get stuff like that. In many ways, you get fish oil. Fish oil, if you drink it, is disgusting. But the fish oil tabs, you don't even feel anything. You just pop it in, it's fine. But gummies, for instance, they've supplemented my need to have a candy. Like, I know for a fact I'm popping 2 gummies a day, and they'll almost in a weird ways a supplement for any form of sugar which I want in my system. And so people aren't worried about taking it as well. It doesn't feel medicinal. So the transition from being medicinal to being nutrition, I feel is a very interesting thing to go, which also doesn't require anything. You're just popping something in your mouth and it's like a chewy candy.
But I actually think where the opportunity lies is not in lifestyle. I think the opportunity actually lies in medical problems, which are not like a problem to the extent where you need to consult a doctor, but can cause discomfort. So for example, I'm actually very bullish on gut health, and not because I have like 6 million gut health issues, but the number of Indians who later in their life find out that they have allergies to lactose. There are all sorts of blood tests coming up where, people are finding random allergies like mujhe tomato se allergy and God knows what else. But I think, and also if you look at the kind of food we eat, right? It's got a high amount of carb, high amount of protein. All this shit takes, all kinds of enzymes to sort of digest and break down. But basically, gut health, PCOD, so women's issues, menstrual related issues. I think all of these are massive, massive opportunities to, tap into. And I think, 2 points that I'll add over here is the way in which companies are also differentiating themselves is, I find spectacular. So, for example, there's a company called Aloe Health, which is run by the ex-Ola co-founder, I think, Pranay Jivrajka. And he's basically created this platform dedicated to men's sexual wellness only. And if you go onto that platform, there's a lot of content. So actually the big differentiator over here is high quality content, which informs and educates customers. Like if you open B Body Wise's Instagram handle, I think they've done a fabulous job where, they really make it easy for consumers to access information about problems which you don't even know you're having, or you don't even necessarily realize. So like a very simple thing, right? PCOS, apparently 1 in every 3 women have PCOS. I've had PCOD in the past, right? You don't realize that you have these issues, and it can also be a very alienating experience because, for example, like when I had PCOD, you break out, you put on weight, there's like 60 other, bodily issues that happen parallelly. I think the great thing that these companies have done is, in their own way, they've democratized consumption of these categories, and not just consumption as in literally taking a gummy or a tablet or whatever and putting in your mouth, but consuming information about all of these problems, ailments, etc. that exist. So I think content is going to play a very, very big role. And my 2 cents over here is the ones who will really win and create products that are not a feature but are, business lines unto themselves, are ones who can demonstrate problem solution or can crush distribution through a network of doctors, married to a really strong retail channel. So those are my 2 cents on all things nutraceuticals and supplements. What about you?
I actually want to get into the live audio space, right? I think that's an interesting space to look at. It obviously, peak of 2021 was when Clubhouse kind of came in and was all the rage, and the entire world was supposedly moving to audio only because we were tired of our screens, but we weren't tired of our screens for too long. On the other end, you had Twitter, which very quickly kind of jumped in and launched Twitter Spaces. Interesting side note, there was a podcast where Twitter's product chief, I forget who it was from Twitter, who spoke about it and said they had a choice between, should we launch a Clubhouse kind of audio platform or should we launch Fleets, which was their audio tweet format. They chose Fleets. He says in hindsight, maybe wasn't the best call to take. But because it also built that platform to a certain extent, which is why they could do this so quickly. They could bring Spaces in quickly because they actually built it. Which, I mean, sometimes I guess these things kind of help out in hindsight. So that kind of came in and took away some of that luster. Then you had... what else? Who else kind of came in? Facebook, as always, kind of came in quickly and launched their own audio platform over there. Same time, interestingly, you had Instagram move their live platform from being just 2 people to having, you can have multiple people on it. So they stuck to video, but they gave you the option to do it that way. And then Spotify acquired Green Room, which is already an established platform which focused only on sports and very I think it was football, if I remember right, that it focused on, but hasn't done too much with it since. All that's happening. And then suddenly you have LinkedIn, just launched their audio events platform. They're very clearly calling it an audio events platform. And they're saying videos coming to that very soon. So lots happening in the audio space suddenly. And Twitter Spaces seems to be the front runner right now, even though the Clubhouse CEO doesn't seem to feel that it is. So what do you think about this? What do you think about audio events and audio live?
I mean, I think it's so interesting. There's such a massive opportunity because, you look at like podcasts and what's been able to happen over there. Obviously it's a much longer sort of format. But if you go back to OG, right, which is radio, I think the key to good audio is high quality programming. And I think what isn't being invested in enough, and I think that, could have been Clubhouse's Achilles heel, is just not enough of a focus on moderators, curators, speakers, session holders, because that is a craft, right? I mean, growing up on radio, which is what, you and I obviously did, even though we're 10 years apart, 8 years apart, I just want to call out to that before people think I'm also turning 40 in 7 months. No, but, jokes aside, like there was something about like there's this RJ in Delhi called Sarthak, right? And he was a gangster. Like his shows were always so funny and he had this way of like talking to people and engaging with them. So I think the thing with audio is, it's a difference in between a good podcast and a great podcast and a bad podcast, right? It all comes down to the capability of using voice to, and also what I want to say is like a lot of people have a very irritating voice. So, how do you solve for that? But yeah, I think, I'm interested to see what happens over here. It's just fascinating that, apart from like music, no other format has really got the kind of scale, not even podcasting for that matter. But back to you, man, you're a pro in this space.
So I actually had thought this whole thing was phasing itself out, to be honest. But Spaces has really kind of come back. I mean, Twitter kind of built it in at the center of their app now. Supposedly, the reason why both Twitter and LinkedIn took stories off their platforms was because they were adding in these features in there. But I feel the way LinkedIn is pitching it makes it very interesting, because if you look at how people are using Twitter Spaces, and I'm talking very broad, they're obviously very, very different use cases. Press conferences, you have events, you have a lot of that digital event piece, all that going here. And I think that's a great space to take this, because in many cases, you just want to be there, you want to listen to that happening. You want to hear a discussion that's moderated, like you mentioned, right? Properly moderated. And also you have this random late night jams, so people kind of jumping in. Like I was so we spoke about Router a little earlier. I was one of the people moderating for Router's announcement of their latest funding. And that session went on for a good 2 hours, right? And the retention was pretty high. They were at some point, I think it was upwards of about 400 people on that space. And it was literally just like founders talking, maybe asking questions about their journey. You have investors talking. So it's interesting to see the space this is taking. I don't think this is competing at all with podcasts directly or with video platforms or tweets. I think it's a great complementary feature to have for specific use cases.
Yeah.
And it's also great for someone who can just want like drive a conversation long enough. So I'd say if you use it right, it's a great feature to add. It's not a platform. But one of the most interesting things in recent times, there's an article with the Clubhouse CEO, and he's saying that they'll only stay audio. And I think one of the big things they've had as a problem is you can't build a community with just one feature, and people kind of pop in on and off and they check what's going on. A few shows have done well, but in the US at least, you had a lot of people who had Clubhouse shows who moved to Spaces because they could do both. Because you go onto Twitter, you're scrolling through and suddenly something's right on top and you go into that, or something which is right in the center. So I feel that's really what's really changed there in that space.
I love what you brought up, right? I think it's so important. And that's where LinkedIn is getting interesting, because the use case for audio on LinkedIn is so clear, which is your leadership conferences, your skill building conferences, right? So instead of you signing up for a cohort-based course, which is held on Zoom, you can literally find the hoster of the cohort-based course, pay him through LinkedIn and even attend the session on LinkedIn, right? Especially if they're looking at moving into all sorts of spaces, quote unquote, whether it's, private, public audio sessions. And also they've got video plugged in, which is great. But I think the point that you brought up is so vital. On Twitter, again, you've got very active communities like Twitter India's marketing community, startup community, and obviously the journal political community. Those are three very clearly identified use cases for what you are supposed to talk about. Otherwise, it just becomes like shit posting.
What I don't know is one of the things two things went off for Clubhouse. Interestingly, if you go back to it, is they were initially iOS only, and that time a lot of people really liked it. They made it Android also, and this is not shitting on Android people at all. Is that's when a lot of stuff went sideways, because they couldn't manage the scale that came with it, the kind of the wider spectrum of audience that kind of brought in, and stuff like Shoot Your Shot didn't really help. Right, Shoot Your Shot is obviously a phenomenon in the audio space, but I feel that really took it sideways, because it took something which was about discussion and community to also to like, on one end you had political conversations which went super like rumor mill and everything else like that. I've jumped into some of those just listen and see what's going on. On the other end you had Shoot Your Shot. So I feel that also took it into other places. Also, Twitter's going to have a huge problem with this, right? There are a lot of political conversations happening in these spaces, and some of them require moderation. And moderating audio is going to be a pain.
Impossible. Yeah.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to report abusive content? I think Spaces had to update recently, because for you to report abusive content on Spaces, you had to be in the space. But if people jumped into the space, they were getting trolled and getting pushed out, so they couldn't report it. But now you are allowed to kind of report it without jumping into the space as well. So I think moderation is going to be the most like important thing. And I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't understand how the science could work.
Yeah. And, with Twitter, especially generally, I love Twitter, but, it generally has a tendency to, bring out the worst in the worst. People are who they are, but I think Twitter has a tendency to really create echo chambers of, all kinds of crazy things. And the problem with that is the repercussions are fairly external, and not just Twitter but Facebook. All these guys have gotten into so much trouble for the outcome of this, hate speeches, this, that and the other, that they've sort of let loose. Absolutely, I think moderation is going to, but this is where LinkedIn wins. Like, it goes back to my prediction. I just think LinkedIn has engineered itself for people giving a shit about their reputation, and
they need to get all these features on their mobile app. A lot of this stuff doesn't work on the mobile app, which is the big problem. If you are a creator,
I don't have their app. Yeah.
You can't do a lot of that on their app, which is either that's why they're doing it, because most people don't have the app, which is again I guess a problem in the long term. But you got to make these things work on mobile. If you want the new age creator to be on LinkedIn and you have a creator push, get this on your app. I think that's a big problem they have. But so that we don't go deeper into this, we have a very exciting guest, and we already have had a reasonably long episode. We'll go in for a break. We'll be right back with Shephali, who's going to tap into a few of these topics and a lot more.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं, हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार।
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we have a very exciting guest today. We have, I'm going to still ask her to explain how to pronounce her name, and we've had a long discussion about this before we brought her on. Shephali, thanks for coming on the show. You're tech, you talk about tech culture, all that stuff through the Mint, and your articles are super exciting because I feel that you have a bit of a lens on what's happening online in India, which I feel that very few journalists have been able to put across in the way that you do. So we're super excited to have you here.
Woohoo! I'm actually doubly excited, or should I say triply excited, because I'm going to be talking to the two of you. And for a change, I didn't have to sort of set up a time to learn from you folks. It was the other way around. So it's like, why would I say no to an opportunity like that?
I think this is going to be one mutual, okay, we just love what you do conversation at some point. But I think talking about what's going on, what's been keeping you excited about what's happening on the internet in India over the last year or two? I'm going to start off with that, and then I'm going to let Suchita come in with a couple of questions on her own. And if I sound like a weird nasal Vader, my cold is still holding strong there. So yeah, what's keeping you excited about internet culture in India lately?
I was just thinking about it. If I had thought about this 2 years ago, that at some point I would be saying the answer is memes. Because in the last maybe 6 months or so, the number of stories I've done where I've gone deep, into those mimetic rabbit holes and written sort of tomes, like 1,000, 2,000 words on memes and their impact, and analyzing where they're coming from, where they're going, and why some of them can be very disturbing, some of them are very problematic, objectionable, and some of them very liberating, some of them very game-changing, in the way they are being used to express certain things that you would otherwise not be allowed to express. Yeah, I think it's a meme world. We're all just living in a world of memes. And that's something that really excites me, from Burari death-related memes that came up, which made me realize that there have been dreams and dreams of studies that have been done on suicide memes. And that something like suicide memes actually exists. Basically peer-reviewed studies have happened on that in the last decade or so. I think that was fascinating. Traumedy memes, which is all your dank memes, which kind of combines trauma and comedy. And, a lot of these accounts that just put out traumedy memes for you to kind of relate to that and how that has kind of manifested itself on the internet. I'm sure a lot of us must be following those accounts, not knowing that that's the genre that they fall into. Yeah. It says about us as consumers of traumedy memes. Very recently, I wrote about, these play-along memes where, you basically put up a picture of an achiever which is squeezed, at the top right corner, and, a political leader's picture would be sort of larger than life postered. And, these are basically memes that help you express your dissent when you're worried about some sort of legal ramifications of actually dissenting, and how that's kind of come about in the last 6 months or so. So yeah, like I said, it's a memes world. We're all living in it.
So I actually have a follow-up question over there, which is, it's so interesting that you allude to memes as a way of, people being able to express themselves, because when you look at just social media and where all it's going, you're seeing this push and pull in between long form, right? You've got Twitter that went from, 180 odd characters to 480 characters or whatever switch that they made. You've got Twitter
240.
Spaces now 240 characters, my bad. You've got Twitter Spaces, you've got YouTube that's straddling in between long form, short form. You've got, Instagram trying to create different, ways in which content consumption happens, whether it's through stories or it's, through obviously their feed. From what the CEO mentioned, Messenger and short form video is going to become, a big area of focus. So I think what would be awesome to understand from you is, obviously the internet has two parts to it, right? One is the way you consume, and the other is the way you describe or converse or, add value to the general sort of construct of the internet. In this push and pull of formats, who is the winner? Who is sort of, what's the leading and the lagging indicator? Sorry to throw in startup jargon over there, but what's really happening over here in terms of, forms of consumption as well as duration of consumption? If you could talk to that as well.
I don't think anybody is a winner. We're all losing, some more than others. Some of us are losing our peace of mind. The others are losing their advertising monies, but obviously making some of it back thanks to creators. And the creators are losing their, again, peace of mind because they're competing constantly and hustling. I'd be hard pressed to think who's winning here. We're all hustling. But as to your question about formats, I think that is something that a lot of people have come to believe, that obviously the majority wants shorter format things. So, be it 15-second videos or one-line captions as opposed to sort of longish captions. Like on Instagram, I know there are some people whose only shtick is just one line, and that just put that one line out and boom. And people tell me that longer captions don't really work as much as those, single line superimposed on a very nice aesthetic looking image, and how that sort of works. Or carousel posts, right? So you have like fewer texts across those different images, as opposed to just having like a long paragraph in captions. So I guess that's something that has been established over 2 years ago or so. That said, it's incredible, and it's also very reassuring that there is still a huge market for long format content as well. And I think that just keeps a lot of us going. I'm not saying that short form does not have quality. I think it takes tremendous amount of talent, skill, and thinking to be able to crunch information in a shorter format for it to be saleable and consumable and leaving some sort of an impact after that. But the fact that, you have, the slow interview by Nilesh or a lot of these podcasts, right? I mean, Seen Unseen goes into like 3-4 hour conversations, and, the way we see the chatter on Twitter about it, it shows that there are so many people who are tuning into it. I think that to me is reassuring, that it's not just the esoteric janta, but it's like you're trying to sort of find a balance as a user. If you're on the treadmill, you'll just tune into that podcast, which is going to be longer. You'll probably 1.2x it, you'll 1.5x it. In some cases, you'll just 2x it. But you want to consume that as well. And that there's like you want to grasp something quickly, that for that you have a 15-second video to sort of catch up on things. And then when you want to subsume yourself into something, you really want to dive deep into something, you have the longer format for it. And I guess now there are more and more consumers like you and me who want to have that balance between the two, and who are either consciously dividing their time between the two, or unconsciously when their device tells them that you're done with all the stories on Instagram, please get off your phone, is when they go and read a book or an ebook, or they tune into any of these podcasts. So I guess the market even here on is going to be dominated by short format. But longer format is going to thrive still. Obviously, it'll have shorter numbers, but I guess it'll be premium quality, right? So you'll commercially find different ways to sustain it. Yeah, but I guess the difference is that you don't have to find ways to sustain short. It sustains itself. Whereas for long, we have to kind of fight. What do you think? Both of you are in the space as well.
There's so many interesting things happening around short format, right? I mean, you wrote a very interesting piece about how stories has disappeared from all platforms. Right? There was a time when Twitter had its own version of stories. LinkedIn had its own version.
Zomato had stories.
Zomato had stories. And suddenly all of it just went away. Right. And at some point, and everybody was like, okay, is short format going away? But then YouTube launches shorts, and then everybody has that. LinkedIn just launched audio, and looks like that's going to become video as well. So when I'm seeing all of that, I'm like, maybe there are short bites. Some formats lend themselves well to short format, and some work really well for long. And I guess they'll both coexist. But YouTube is still running video. I don't think, as much as Instagram wants to get into that side of things, YouTube is like, it's literally, I mean, the second largest search engine after Google. So I mean, forget that sometimes. So I feel that's really made it very interesting to look at. But what's your deep cuts on the stories piece? Why did that go away?
I think it's that, and that's one of the reasons I did the stories, because there was just so much noise around it when everybody was launching it, right? I remember so many screenshots on my Twitter timeline where people from the US as well as from Indian tech Twitter were putting up these screenshots comparing how every platform now looks just the same, because every platform has these, round things on top, and these are disappearing fleets or stories on LinkedIn or even Zomato for that matter. Slack had announced they would launch something like that, but by the time they did eventually launch something, it was nothing like stories. And while I was talking to a few people for the story, one person said something which made a lot of sense to me, which was that nobody really questioned why it makes sense for their platform. Everybody just thought that, okay, Snapchat did this, they nailed it, then Instagram copied, and like most other things that they've copied in the past, they did it one up, and they kind of succeeded. And so sure, you have a formula which has worked for one person, which worked even better for the copycat, and let's just like run with it. Because like I remember one of the interviews from one of the Slack folks was that this is the flavor of the time, this is the need of the hour, and therefore we need to do it. Well, I guess that time passed quickly. But I think that's one thing that makes sense, right? Which is that, does your platform really need it? Is the consumer coming onto your platform for that? Like, we are going on Zomato or Swiggy to order food. I don't need to. I'd much rather watch maybe the food creators and what they're up to, and their aesthetic looking pictures on Instagram or even Twitter for that matter, or Pinterest. Why would I go to Zomato for that? It's like very need-based relationship that I have with that app. And that is why I guess it didn't work there. And now we have the same thing with short videos, right? Like every platform, obviously started with Reels, and now you have YouTube Shorts, and now Twitter is planning to launch something of a TikTok alternative. We have like 5 to 10 homegrown TikTok alternatives. Yeah. So many of them have already kind of shut shop, and we haven't heard much about that. So I guess it's ultimately going to be very few people who will be able to make it stick. So WhatsApp stories is still working. Facebook stories is still working, because those are platforms where you do spend more time. It's not a need-based relationship. And I guess that's what I'm thinking, is what went wrong with all of the other platforms, where the interaction was not, that's one thing. And the second thing was obviously advertiser interest, right? If your reach is so much lesser than Facebook's entire universe's reach, you are not going to get advertisers, and you need to feed the families of the people who are working on that particular product to keep it running. And how will you do that if you're not being able to monetize that feature itself, right? And I guess so a combination of these two reasons may have kind of led to the end of story.
I have a quick question over here. Story sounds like the quick commerce of 2015, where everyone wants to go so, but no one really knows.
I was going to call it the house of brands, but that it's 2022.
That joke does not work, Varun. Think fast. Think again.
Bad joke. Go on.
But going to the platform that copies it all and then uncopies it all, and seems to be in a cluster of a situation, which is Instagram, right? And as per there, you wrote this lovely article on how Instagram wants to be about all things infotainment, but suddenly there's this political bubble that's sprouting up within Instagram, which some could call entertaining, but sort of sets the context of Instagram in a bit of a haze, right? If you were running Instagram, or if you were heading strategy for Instagram in India, what would you do to get them back on track to what can actually lead to growth for them? And not to sort of put you on the spot, but what is their newfound obsession with wanting to become the TikTok in developing countries, apart from the obvious reason, which is, let's use India as a Dow farm? So Instagram, what is happening with Instagram? How are they navigating all of this? And why is this obsession of, TikTok clonism happening?
I think a lot has gone out of hand with a lot of these companies, where I believe they genuinely did not see things spiraling so bad. Why talk about open social networking platforms? Look at a platform like GitHub, right, which just hosts open source code. I think content regulation, content monitoring, they did not think that was a part of their KRA. They thought that content monetization was the only thing that they had to do. And I think a lot of these people succeeded in doing that. till they realize that, oh my God, it seems that the most important thing that I need to be doing right now is content monitoring. And that's not an easy job. And I mean, we've seen those leaked files, and one of the biggest challenges there is language and context, especially with a country like India, where, like you rightly pointed out, Instagram has become highly political now. And how do you control a beast like that, just grown so big out of your hand, and you don't have the kind of expertise and the kind of language support to be able to track so many things? So I guess if I were at any of the big tech companies at this point, I would just constantly beef up my moderators and their community and just be very clear as to what I stand for. And I stand for somebody who's not going to be an enabler of misinformation, enabler of fake news, enabler of hate crime, enabler of harassment against minorities and people of a certain gender. So I'm not saying that it's very easy to do, because clearly the ones at the receiving end who are trying to even trying to understand how it feels when somebody is trolled or harassed on the internet, when it's not happening to you in person. We're still trying to sort of come to terms with what that does to us, to our minds and to our bodies. I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy task for them. And yes, for sure, some of them are trying to do it. They've put in their steps and they keep sending us all their quotes saying that they've got some, bodies of fact checkers that they've aligned with. But they need to do a whole lot more in.
As we've seen creators become a large part of the content that we actually consume online, how have you seen that change the narrative online, but also like how have you seen them use it in ways which traditionally media would never use, which has almost become like, now it's like we think of it as, okay, this is normal now, but it wasn't normal 2 years ago. So how have you seen that change, especially like conversation, content, etc. in India? It's a slightly broad-based question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, but I love this question. And I think that is one of the things that really excites me, which is the kind of conversations that we are able to have now, which we wouldn't have, at least as a woman, I wouldn't have imagined that we'd ever be able to sort of be a part of. You have gynecologists like Uterus on Instagram, and they're talking about all sorts of things from, whether you should, and, if you're not using menstrual cups, then that's fine. I mean, that was her recent reel, and there are so many women who are able to sort of access a lot of medical information, useful information about their bodies, which otherwise they were not able to, because gynecologists that you otherwise had access to offline, you were either with your mother or, somebody that you were not comfortable asking these questions with. And, oftentimes what would happen is that these people would ask you, they won't ask you, are you sexually active? They would ask you, are you married? And those are the kind of things that the medical sort of, creators from the medical field have been able to change. You have people who are giving you advice on legal matters, especially women lawyers who are giving you advice on how, if you're threatened online, what's the kind of sort of legal shield that you have against some of these things. And I think that's very game changing. Finance creators and the kind of wealth of knowledge that they bring there. But obviously that has a lot of problematic riders as well, because you need to be extremely responsible when you're doling out financial advice. But the fact that a lot of it is accessible now, and hordes of people have started following a lot of these infotainment and purely just info creators, I think that is a big change, where from comedy and just anything that has to be funny to now there are takers for content that's info heavy. Obviously, it has to look aesthetically pleasing and all of that. That doesn't change as yet, unfortunately. But I'm glad that it's at least there, right? You go from Twitter influencers who basically, would do a lot of shit posting, and that became sort of, the thing, yeah. I think 5 years ago. And, those are the kind of people who then became really popular. To then you had a series of comics, from Tanmay to Aditi Bittal and so on and so forth. And then you had all these content houses who were also creating slice of life relatable content, but at the heart of it was comedy. And then you had this next, set of sort of YouTubers who were telling you, giving you tutorials on, DIY a lot of things. And now you have, basically you think of any field and you will find, there are people who are trying to simplify that field for people who think that, okay, this is something that's completely out of my domain and I don't know how this works. And I think that's the biggest and the best change of all that I've seen so far, thanks to the quote-unquote creator economy. And I'm really glad for that. And while, there are sort of pitfalls to it as well, because a lot of this content really needs to be sort of looked at from a very progressive versus regressive lens. But yeah, that's like an ongoing debate. Yeah. I'm just happy that this is happening right now.
I have a quick follow-on question over there where, when it comes to creator monetization as well, right? It seems like every creator is now becoming a product because, now after advertising, that seems to be the next wave, right? So everyone's either launching courses or doing workshops or, is doing ABCX, enter name of some fancy brand. Where do you see this productification of creators going to? And is there another revenue stream? I wonder, I wonder if there's a balance in between these two worlds of pushing products that belong to someone else through content or pushing your own product, because I feel like that's a trap that especially a platform like Instagram could totally run into, right? Where everyone's just peddling or pushing something or the other. So how do you see that balance being played out? Advertising revenue not doing much for, YouTubers, for example. So how much can you really earn only being a YouTuber? You have to start plugging in, content through insertions and this, that, and the other. So could you talk to that?
Yeah, and to add to your point about productification of creators, they're launching their own labels now. So not just sort of, promoting other people's brands, they're also creating their own products, tangible products, and selling that, which is also one of the things that I'd written about. I think fundamentally, just like, you and I, Varun, you and I, we're all sort of fighting to stay relevant, right? And I think everybody has kind of realized sooner or later that advertising revenue is not going to sustain that relevance. And therefore, everybody is kind of branching out. And, for some, it means you kind of launch cohort-based courses. For some, it means that you get into book deals and and then your books become series. And then for some, it means that, you start off with comedy and then you become like, if I were to take the example of Prajakta Kohli and Bhuvan Bam, they're established actors and singers now. And so, not just comic artists. You have to basically keep finding your route. And these are very different routes. Some get into gaming, some get into live streaming, example of Shephali Bhatt. Everybody's kind of found a way or is on their way to finding a way to have I'm relevant for at least another 2 years. I'm relevant for at least another, a year and a half. I'm actually not saying more than 2 years because we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. So I think this is pretty much that. Does that answer your question, Suchita?
100%. And I think another question that I had, which maybe we can get to a little later, but there's so much of Pareto that also applies on these platforms, right? In the sense like your Instagrammers, your top Instagrammers will always be your top 10%, your top YouTubers. It's, Lee Jin wrote this lovely article on the missing middle class of creators. I wonder what the manifestation of that will be specifically in an Indian context where वैसे भी कोई खास middle class है नहीं IRL, let alone in the metaverse. But in any case, we can get to that in a bit. Viri, over to you.
I actually want to ask you something which we actually spoke about on this episode before you kind of came on, which is what's your take on all the audio platforms? Now, LinkedIn has audio. Obviously, Clubhouse, I feel somehow becoming is
plateaued, or whatever is
very
there
nice
is
by saying
kind of
plateaued. So I'm going to let you stay with that.
Died. Rest in peace.
There is no club in that. It's just a house now.
Suchita said it.
So, but you also have Twitter Spaces, which suddenly seems to have come. There was a period when people weren't using Spaces as much. Now I always see a bunch of Spaces. That's really kind of become one thing. There's poor Green Room, which got acquired by Spotify and just became crickets, is what I've read is happening on Green Room.
Green Room, yeah.
So what's your take on that space? Just generally, like how people seem to be using it. Is it a feature or is it a platform is one thing, but also like how do you see people using it, especially the way they are right now?
I think Twitter at this point has shown us that it is a feature and, it may not have a life as a platform. And again, if we were to kind of link it to the stories piece, where, what are you going on that platform for? And when it was just lockdown everywhere all around the world in some sense or the other, people were going on Clubhouse. I was spending a lot of time on Clubhouse at the time as well. But now the things started to change slowly and gradually. We were anyway nobody kind of, consciously reduced the time that they were spending on Twitter. And it was just there.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where, and I think, again, props to them because they removed fleets. They learned a lesson from copying one person. Now they're copying another person, but they seem to have a problem of plenty now, by which I mean that if you have more than 500 people on a space, which happens quite often on the spaces that I join in to listen in, you just like, you have glitch after glitch, and you can't listen to the, to one damn sentence without any sort of jarring noise.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to see all the spaces live at any given point, on the Twitterverse, I think that to me is something that I really wanted as a user, and getting that has just been great for me, which was not something that Clubhouse, I'm not sure if they've changed that now, but until a few months ago when I was still going on Clubhouse, before I wrote about it, plateauing, it didn't have that. But also to Clubhouse's credit, there are certain rooms that have still been consistent. Now, lesser said, the better about the quality of the content on those rooms, and some who are, again, of a political nature that kind of delegitimize a lot of news and legitimize a lot of propaganda. So that's a problem that needs to be managed. But I would not go to the extent of saying that it's defunct now. It's still there.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it's become like one of those subcultures that maybe you and I are not really aware of right now. And one day there'd be like a room that would just like explode, and then we'll all hear about it in some story. I really hope I don't have to write that story.
I end up always seeing like late night time pass on, because I'm awake, kind of spaces on my feed. I'm guessing. Hopefully that's the only ones you'll see. Late night time pass.
So I see a lot of spaces from US-based media, and I think that is something that I've really enjoyed of late, because I remember on Jan 6th, a lot of the different publications there were kind of revisiting what happened at Capitol Hill the year before, and a lot of the journalists who were there, reporting at the time, they were recounting what happened. And I think some of those things are really fascinating when they were discussing, the Theranos case and, what happened there, listening to journalists from that part of the world who've been, we've been following some of these cases as tech journalists. And I think it just gives you that kind of access that you would normally not get to. So I think as a media person, it's a window into a world that I've always, and I'd always want to sort of get access to, but you can't, right? You can't just DM a journalist from a different country and say, hey, how is it reporting on this? I've got deadlines. So I think that to me is, again, as a journalist and as a media person, I think that's a big plus for spaces, that it gives you, it's like TikTok, right?
Yeah.
TikTok gave you like an in on world culture and, world pop culture.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Reels has been able to emulate that successfully, because a lot of people don't feel the need to, repurpose their TikToks on Reels. So it's still not the same. You still, in so many of my stories in the last, now it's been 18 months since TikTok got banned in India.
Yeah.
And yet so many of my stories, the one that I'm writing right now, it all starts with, and this started on TikTok. And these could be phenomena that would have started just 6 months ago and, become relevant in India, but it all has eventually, initially it all started on TikTok. So it's kind of something that you can't,
There seem to be rumors that it will come back though, because I think since June, July, I've been seeing news saying the way PUBG came back, maybe TikTok will come back in a different way. If it does, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Oh yeah. Oh,
I don't think it's coming back.
No?
Sorry, guys. PUBG came back because it's Korean, right? Or like Singapore based or something?
The publisher is South Korean.
Yeah.
And the distributor in India was Tencent, which is a Chinese investment company. And therefore there were, some sort of issues there. But, the publisher of the game was always South Korean. So
yeah.
Therefore, I think there wasn't that much of an issue. I mean, right now, if it comes back, I really don't know how this is going to work out, because a lot of the, to your question about the middle class, I know we wanted to come to later on, but TikTok has kind of brought into the open the whole the stark difference between the haves and the have-nots of the creator economy, right? And even till date, just last week, I was talking to somebody who said that, their creator has about 4 million followers and still charges maybe 4 times as much as another creator who may have 25 million followers on Instagram gets from brands. And, that is because this is a creator who appeals to, the middle or the lower middle, or basically the less privileged non-urban user
the
on
masses,
Instagram.
as they're
The
popularly
masses.
called.
As opposed to the urban masses.
Yeah.
I think we're all the masses. But so that still happens, right? And I don't know when it will change. But at some point, I think it will also manifest in some... I know a lot of creators are angry because of that. Because, they've garnered all these numbers and they clearly have the masses with them. But just because they're not English speaking and, they're not as posh as some of the more privileged creators, it just obviously they feel a certain resentment for kind of losing out because of those things, when it is a it should be kind of like how people say it's democratized, access for a lot of people. It hasn't.
I've seen a lot of creators move to Dubai who were doing a lot of TikTok, and they're sitting in Dubai making TikTok videos, repurposing them on Reels and coming back. And I'm guessing those are some of the larger ones who were big on TikTok, didn't want to lose that following, which I find super interesting, because Dubai is like you take a 3-hour flight, do a lot of TikTok, come back in like a couple of weeks. Seems to be like, I've been fascinated to see that. It's been crazy.
Also, the market over there is very welcoming, and it pays you a lot in terms of brand collabs. Like if you're able to sort of, make your name, because I was in UAE for a while during the pandemic, and I recently moved back. And I noticed there were very few creators over there, as opposed to India, where you have probably more creators than viewers in some cases. And that's probably why you have so many creators with over 1 million followers at this point. So, that stops being, some sort of a currency after a point because of that. But no, so coming back to Dubai and the Middle East in general, I think it's a potential market for a lot of these creators. I know a lot of the influencer marketing agencies who have now set up their second office in Dubai. So creators not only are going there, also trying to sort of set up a base there and have like a, audience from that part of the world, because then brands would pay you more. Those brands would want to pay you. And they pay you well. And then obviously for a lot of people, they're also sort of, trying to set up offices over there because no tax.
Yeah. Is that why you're there, Shephali? Tell us honestly. Monkey boss.
I was still very much working for Indian publications.
I have a last question for you. There's so many Indian social media platforms that have tried to scale, right? What are your 2 cents on Mod, ShareChat, Roposo, +++, and are they just there because TikTok isn't here? Is that what's happening, or have you really seen some of them been able to build significant clout, whether it's vis-a-vis creators or audiences, etc.?
Yeah, so I guess all of them started because TikTok was suddenly banned. So that was the kind of, obviously they would say that because there was a market, even like despite of TikTok being there, they felt that there was a market. But the truth is that a lot of them could get the kind of numbers that they got initially because there was no TikTok. So for a lot of people who, like I remember somebody in the events business was once telling me that, there was an event that was organized and a lot of the TikTokers were hesitant to attend it because they felt like there's a lot of Instagrammers there and they would feel out of place because this is not their world. And
how interesting.
Yeah. For a lot of people who didn't have, say, the backing of a tier 1 influencer marketing agency head, they would have gone to a lot of these platforms thinking that, this is where I will feel at home. I will not feel that I'm in, a posh party where I don't know anybody. And some of these platforms do have numbers, by the way.
Significantly, and no one's doubting their MAU and DAOs. Like that's.
And forget that. It's just the engagement that they get because labels are spending money on some of these platforms, and it's giving them returns for, say, some of their regional music that's coming out. So a lot of the mass non-English speaking audience is there on these platforms, and you get to see the kind of content here again. Without getting into the nitty-gritties of the quality of that content or the substance of that content. This is the kind of content that you would most likely not see on your Instagram feed unless, you really dig deep to kind of like, go down certain rabbit holes. So, some of these platforms have been able to make it work because India has so many fragmented markets, right? But to Varun's, rumor, if it were to be true, things will get very interesting. And I don't think I know enough at this point to predict what that means, but they will get interesting if TikTok comes back.
No, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we're definitely going to I think what we're going to do is we're going to keep poking you to keep coming back from time to time because you have a fabulous lens on what's happening in the space. And
I have so many more questions for you. I was going to ask you.
I wanted to ask you people so many questions. That has not happened.
I had questions for you on Snapchat and what is their India strategy because they've been poaching a lot of talent from Meta. But maybe
Snapchat is very important.
I think we should do this on a regular basis. We'll bring you back for another edition very soon because our producer will throw something at us if we chat with you any longer and not do any of the the pieces that we actually said that we would do beyond our conversation.
Yeah, we need to chat again so that I can ask you people what you think of the basically everything, all these questions that you asked me because I need to know what you think of it. You're kind of in it and I'm just watching it from the sidelines. So I'd really like to know how you perceive all of these different universes.
That's what we blabber about on Think Fast every week. But for sure, we should just catch up and we can definitely have that chat.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me, both of you.
Thanks, Chef.
Thank you, Chef. Yes, we're going to call you that.
Thanks, Such.
XOXO. Gossip Girl.
Wasn't that a fabulous chat? So we're going to, while you soak all of those things in, and we as hosts sniffle away. You heard many sniffles from both of us. Both of us have some sniffles around because of weather conditions. So we'll be right back with Think Fast shortly with our weekly recommendations.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Khel Niti completes 200 episodes. Rajiv Mishra, Nikhil Chopra and Rajkumar Sharma discuss the final test match between India and South Africa. They also talk about whether or not Virat will return as captain. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita dig into Apple's $3 trillion market cap and Bezos' Chirag Din uncle look for New Year's Eve. On Raw and Organic, Kunal talks to pole fitness trainer and flexibility coach Joanna Michelle. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam finds out how REITs are beneficial from Vinod Rohira. He's the CEO of Mindspace Business Park REIT. And on Filter Coffee, Karthik talks to sports journalist Pradeep Magazine about his new book, Not Just Cricket. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. We really do appreciate the word of mouth. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms that you're listening to us on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. And we are also on YouTube. On YouTube, you can check out our various channels on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are Sniffle Central today, and I've had many, many dad jokes. Not one, not two, but many things. And I'm in a bit of a mood. I think it's the medication. I'm on cold medication.
Blame the medication.
I'm blaming
the medication.
Maybe the gummies went off today.
I can't believe you have 2 gummies a day. What for, Varun? Such bata. Dil se bata. Such.
Biotin for my hair and apple cider vinegar for my lean body. Is how I call
my
it.
God. Yeah.
Yes.
Strategy. This is how Varun gets more followers on Instagram.
Yes. Also, gummy brands, if you want me to do some content, I'm available.
आप बड़े plugs मार रहे हो आज किताब gummies.
What are your recommendations apart from me selling gummies on this podcast? What are your recommendations for the week?
Varun really is in a mood today, guys. As am I. I have a fun recommendation for you also. For those of you who follow me on Instagram and just like in life in general, I'm obsessed with all things home decor and I generally love makeover shows, especially on YouTube. There's this really cool channel called How to Renovate a Chateau, which is super awesome. It's basically about like this couple and their kid, and they buy a chateau in like some corner of France, and all the renovations are DIY. So it's basically like this couple literally sitting and fixing shit themselves. It's a lovely YouTube channel. Of course, like I love a good before and after. So there you go. How to renovate a chateau for your bougie week ahead. What about you, Varun?
What is my recommendation for the week? I've actually been so there's this trend called slow YouTubers. So I'm actually consuming a lot of slow YouTuber content. These are YouTubers who aren't hyper and are going super slow. This is one creator called Nathaniel Drew, who I've been consuming a lot of. He has 2 channels, but like great content, but just generally like you get to see a person's entire life, but from like a slow perspective. And just like his journey has been interesting. So I've been consuming a lot of that. Apart from that, I have a book recommendation. Not my own. I'm not plugging that in a second time today. Which is something which I just started reading. It's called The Attention Economy. It's about how we can all kind of like unplug from our screens in that sense. So it's super interesting. I just started reading it. I think it gives great perspective on like we're all stuck on this, right? We're all on our screens and all of that. We've spoken about that a little bit across some of the content of the episode, but it's a great book. Check it out. Attention Economy. It's a lovely cover. I'm a sucker for good covers on books. But that's my recommendation for the week. And buy your gummies, guys. I'm a gummy bear. That's a...
Oh God. Okay, so Varun, we don't want to hear you sing. We want to go and get a glass of wine because it's been a long week and it's a Friday evening while we record this. So thank you, dear listeners, for listening to yet another episode of Think Fast.
Think fast.
And
we never fast, but we always think jokes. And we talk over each other.
We have some really fun guests lined up this month. Should we give our listeners a sneak peek into the topics?
Yeah.
We have Web3, crypto, NFT. Wow. We've also got Reliance. We're going to be talking about Reliance and what's happening over there because that's something that Varun and I, don't have much intel on. And you're bringing someone from the
a lot of stuff on brands and advertising, what's been happening in that space. We haven't gotten into that yet. So we're going to do that as well. So like lots of fun guests coming in. We realize that we need some more people coming in giving insights apart from both of us because we give enough insights anyway.
Correct. Toodles, my poodles.
This is me signing off, showing my Dwayne Johnson toy if you are watching this on YouTube. But apart from that, bye guys. From me and Mr. Johnson.
See ya. Toodles.
Toodles. Pass.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring you a very hardcore chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.